From Pasadena Media News, this is a news update. A scholarship formed by local filmmakers in memory of Anthony McLean is now accepting applications. The local filmmakers created a documentary titled Thorns on the Rose, Black Abuse, Corruption, and the Pasadena Police, which looks at the relationship between the Pasadena Police Department and the black community across the last 40 years. Proceeds from the film were planned to go towards impactful things in the community. Ultimately, a decision was made to create a scholarship with the goal of assisting college-bound high school students and to bring the community together as a whole. Scholarship applicants must be African American, graduating in 2021, have attended Pasadena, Muir, Marshall, or Blair High School, provide a copy of their last report card, provide a list of programs participated in during the last full year of regular school, submit post-high school plans, and write a 500-word essay about their feelings toward the film and what steps they would take to make relationships between communities and police better. For Pasadena Media, I'm Joe Carbonetta. Thanks for clicking in.
And welcome back. Chief Perez, how you doing today? Thanks for joining. Good. Just, quick update, folks. That scholarship fund, before we jump into this conversation with the chief, that scholarship fund is now at $5,000, and some well-deserving PUSD student will benefit from, graduating student will benefit from that. Chief, we got a lot to unpack, a lot to discuss today. In light of the announcement today that Pasadena Now posted that you've decided to retire at the end of January, essentially.
Sometime in 2022. It could be as early as January or later on in the year. I don't think it'll be later than January. I like where we're at as a department. I made some commitments to get some things going in the organization 3.5 years ago. So we'll be looking at that 4-year mark. And so I like where we're at. I like the leadership. The issues in our community with violence and even police involved incidents. I believe the training we have in place, the things we're doing, the almost 70 officers we're hiring, the cultural awareness aspect, implicit bias. I like where it's all going, and it's got to take off without me at some point. And so if it's as early as January, that's fine. I think calling it out 8 months in advance is probably fair for the community, for the council to really look at whether they want to do a national testing or not do a national testing. It's just, I always think it's tough when you call it out really quick or under pressure for something. That doesn't help a community. It causes more confusion. Right now, the pressure for us is really how we police and trying to make those changes internally. So there's nothing from the council, nothing from the city manager's office or anybody else to have to leave. Otherwise, it'd be now in a few months.
Yeah, I mean, the obviously the elephant in the room or in the conversation is, why wait? Like, why not tender that resignation and leave now? I mean, the community
then you leave a community in a lot of different ways in the organization hanging. There's still things you have to put into place. I like where we're going. I like what's happening. That doesn't mean that you leave right today. If that were the case, I should not announce and wait till January 1st and announce for the next day. That just doesn't make sense. I think a good succession planning for any organization, as I look at places around the country, you always give the organization and the city time to figure out what their plans are going to be. Don't corner everybody up to say we have no plan for exit. This is a great way to do it.
I mean, that is one way to do it, but many in community and different spaces, have actually called for, and you're aware of it, you've heard it, it, for you to be fired. And so to stick around, wouldn't the natural progression and succession be the deputy chief positioning to kind of deal with the things administratively, as opposed to if and when, which we all know it will happen again, officers will use the use of force that will result in potentially someone losing their life. So why not position now to allow the deputy chief to be in position to carry those investigations and all of that?
Absolutely. So it'd be the same thing as me waiting 8 months and then calling it out for a week after that. So this was a better way, I think, for the department, the city, and for the people who have asked for my resignation. If you look at the emails I receive and the comments I get, phone calls, it's 10-1 in support. So I greatly appreciate that from all walks of life around our community. And so I know how people feel in this community more than most people on all corners of our city. And so I realize that. So I think you have to make sure I do, as a leader for this community, a leader for this organization, is not to go by the 10 voices or 15 or 20 voices. The protests that are out there, the demands for change, those will happen regardless of who's chief. If I leave in January and in May we have an officer involved shooting, and God forbid it's a death, the same thing will occur. So that part of it, that visual perceptual part, is not going to change. So it's not a reason to leave a department. If the council said, hey, you know what, maybe you should leave, or the city manager said, hey, you're not hitting the mark anymore, then I would understand that point. But for all the changes that people don't see inside the organization, they really have to have a better view and not be so myopic, because our cultural awareness, the implicit bias, the way we're hiring, all these attributes and these initiatives are coming from years and years of experience and research on my end. So I know why these need to be done. And likely, it's I look around the region and you don't see these type of initiatives being created in almost any police department. So I know it's unique, but at some point the changeover will come.
We definitely want to talk about some of the things that are happening right in the department. But I really want to unpack, like, why now? Like, why after 37 years of service, why do you feel now's the time to get out?
Again, I like we have an amazing department. I like what we're doing. The comments from the community. We have a 26% drop in violent crime. We just arrested the people for the half a dozen murders and the 18 shootings that we've had. One family lost 2 kids out of this thing with a 10-year-old shot. We've done all those things that we need to, and we have our reorg. That was the biggest effort we've needed for decades, was to reorg the department, to change it, not to cost the community money. We have to smash all the old ways of policing, and I've done that. We've created the homeless initiative. We're reaching out to nonprofits way before 2020, and we've also eliminated the gang unit for a better way of trying to reduce crime. All those things needed help. All those things needed to be done, and so I was likely the right person at the right time to get it started. But once the reorg now is in place, I see where it's going. It's going to require the next chief of police to hold to those. If those things start to go away, some of our old policing styles will come back in a lot of other areas outside the critical events that we deal with.
Do you think Deputy Chief Moody is a likely successor for you? Do you feel that she could continue?
Yeah, for the acting chief's job, she has positioned herself well. She's in here for the staff meeting. She's helped on many of these initiatives that we do. So she has a great perspective of that. And really beyond that, it's going to be up to the city manager and the council to look at what kind of direction. Every chief, much like any professional team, there's a period of time that each chief has to do what they've been hired to do. Each one has something different to achieve. We had almost 36 vacancies. People were leaving us. The internal training wasn't where it should be. We had issues with the department, with our equipment, technology. We had issues with vehicles. We had a training curriculum that needed to be changed. All that has been repaired. That doesn't mean it's done. It means now it's on the right path. So it requires a leader to maintain those changes as well as anything new that's needed. So each chief has to be a chief of the times and make sure we get that done.
Okay. I definitely, I told you I want to, talk with you about your decision and review of the Blue case. Also, we want to get an update on the Anthony McClain homicide. But, again, for context, I want to take a look back. We're not going to look at the entire critical incident, but I want to take a look at the bystander video that was released in the Blue case. And then we'll come back and talk about that on the other side. Chief, I understand, and you made it very clear that your decision was based on law, and you were limited, I guess, if anything, in terms of what you could or could not do. But my question to you is not like as the chief of police, but as a father, as a community member, as a human being. When you see that video, do you agree with the chief of police decision?
Yes, because I realize that with every action, there was a reaction. There's no part of violence that we see we're not going to like. It doesn't matter what kind of national incident. If somebody fired at the police and we shoot back, there's no way for any of us to ever really be satisfied with what we see.
I would disagree. When Lloyd Nelson fired at officers last May, I want to say it was, that was pretty open and shut.
For you, I mean, a lot of people I talked to, it wasn't the fact. Mm-hmm. It wasn't the fact. And if there's another shooting in this town again, and even a Nelson situation, we might not have the same response even from you. So I don't know. So people are just tired of seeing this. So I respect your position, but a lot of the comments I got back wasn't that. Here you guys go again. So for me, it is the most difficult thing because of the fact that I sat down inch by inch, slow motion, talking to experts, talking to attorneys everywhere. And so it's still in court. It's still going through. So we're limited in our conversation. But ultimately, it's this. How we train and how we react to situations is hugely important. That was a platform to change a lot of ways of how we do policing today. It really was. And if you have to come in to see what I'm talking about when it comes to immersive training, cognitive training, and how we prepare officers for encounters, it's much different in trying to create de-escalation right off the bat. However, saying that, the officers didn't violate the law and the policy for that time, and even now, and now they handled it. Now, I have kids like you do, and so we tell them, hey, the police pull you over, as I was told by my parents, and in Spanish, hey, do this right. Listen to them. Don't get in a situation where you go defiance against the police. So somewhere along across this nation, we have to find a balance, James, not for me, not for you, but for everybody, to say if the police pull you over and you don't like to stop. I would disagree with anybody to say, well, you got to argue your way out of it. And if it creates that situation, we got to make a stand. I'd rather we not do that across the country. I'd rather we depend on our legislators, our council members, our police chiefs to call them and say, I just got stopped for a ticket and we need to talk about this. And you need to watch the body worn camera. I respect when I get those phone calls and we look at it very, very seriously. But in this case, the problem with policing is that when somebody doesn't cooperate right off the bat, whether it just be a traffic violation, we don't know if it's because you just don't like the police or you're tired of the traffic stops or you just committed a crime. It's for the police officer, it's a big problem. And so
hold that thought, Chief. I got to get out of here for the channel. You're watching The Conversation Live. The Conversation Live focuses on social justice, restorative justice, inclusion, and equality. Until we have another opportunity to speak with you, as always, Agape.
Thank you, man. Take care of yourself.
All right. No, we're still here. We'll finish this conversation on social media. Right. We're clear for the Arroyo channel, folks. But I hear what you're saying. I mean, and comply and complain later doesn't necessarily.
I don't know about comply and complain. We need cooperation on both sides, from police and from the people being stopped. Don't get me wrong. But I'm not a comply type of guy.
Where's that cooperation when we look at like policy issues, not activating body worn cameras? So perhaps before you leave, Vallejo Police has indicated that officers shall operate their cameras. Is that something that?
Yeah, we're looking at all those policies, and discussions are always on the table for that. And my issue with the shall or should, if I see a police officer, even a shall doesn't mean an officer is going to get fired, by the way. We shouldn't, believe that because a police department says shall, that's automatically termination, because that's not the case at all.
I'm not conflating the two. What I'm saying is at least it triggers in their mind that, hey, I better do this, as opposed to there's no issue if I don't, or potentially.
I don't. And so, for me, it's the matter of an officer who doesn't do it. We have to look at why. And a should and a shall are not far from each other when there's no intent by the officer to defy the policy. Mm-hmm. And from a legal standpoint, you talk to legal scholars, they'll tell you that there's not a big gap between the two when there was no criminal intent or purposeful intent not to turn on the cameras. There are some things I'm looking at now to put in place that's going to help us with some of this, but I'll wait for that as we go forward in the next couple of months to see what we could do to find a better balance. So I'm constantly looking at these issues and how we're approaching it. But again, I'll go back to the fact that at some point in this country, the police, we have to do more to gain cooperation. But even before that, once a traffic stop happens, the onset of a driver's conduct towards an officer is already sounding the alarm for the officer. And that's the part that's bothersome for me across these countries. It's not that we pulled somebody over for a stop sign violation, James, or pulled somebody over for no front license plate or rear license plate. It's the fact that we're creating a secondary incident once we don't have cooperation on either side. And by law, when we take our driver's license, it says that we're in fact going to cooperate with the police when we are pulled over. It says it right there. It states it on your driver's license, testing, and the vehicle code. So we all have to have a certain point of cooperation with them and say, I don't like the ticket. I'm going to complain about this. Call your supervisor. Do all those things. Had we gone there with the traffic stop we're talking about or any other, we'd be in a different place. I mean, we've gained 400 guns during COVID.
Well, we talk about that, but what I'm saying is you've said it on this program that de-escalation is nothing more than a form of cooperation, right? And so if the officers are triggering or don't understand their space, that their very presence could be triggering, and then they respond in kind, how is that, where's the humanity in that law enforcement? Where is them seeing that person that they're making contact with, that reptilian brain is fight, flight, or freeze, right? So where's that understanding? Because officers are given the same. It's almost like you're making an unhuman ask of someone not to recognize police contact as a threat, whether they've done something, done nothing, or about to do something. So where's that on the other side?
The fact of the matter is that at the onset of that, when we get stopped by the police, all of us, there's got to be some sort of upfront cooperation from us first. It's the unfortunate part of it. And if we don't, we'll continue to have these incidents across the nation. Officers will probably get fired or go to prison. People may lose life or get hurt on the other side. It'll continue to be a mess for the next 100 years after we all get old, die off, and go on in life. And so these are the real issues. This is why it's important for me. Part of me says, January 1st comes, I may get a second wind and say, I'm not going nowhere. We got more work to do. But right now, we really want to find a balance in our policing structure across this country. We got to stop having secondary incidents. Whoever we blame on the secondary incidents, they just need to stop. We don't want to see them anymore. Okay. So I'm doing my part, James, with the training, with the implicit bias, bringing in psychologists, hiring from the community, diversity. It's all happening. What are we doing on the other side of it? Are we training just our community folks to get pulled over? You do have to have some level of cooperation at the onset. It is a very difficult place. We even have to say that.
Yeah. Well, let's, and I want to we're hard up before we got to get completely out of here. And I definitely want to learn a little bit more about where the McClain investigation is. But first, I want to roll this next clip in. It's from the documentary film, award-winning documentary film, Walking While Black. And we'll talk to the chief on the other side.
I've coined a term, contempt of cop, that I like to use when I talk about officers who punish people for not following an order. And I hear all the time, well, people need to comply. Yes, they do. But guess what? It's not unusual for someone who's broken the law to not want to go to jail. For someone who knows they have a traffic warrant and you stop them for a traffic-related offense to get out the car and run. That's not uncommon. It's inherent to what we do. And so when that happens, you don't get to just shoot them in the back.
Chief, the status of the McClain investigation, where is that right now?
DA's office, we put it together back in November and sent it off to the district attorney's office, and that's where it's at.
Okay. Yeah, I spoke with District Attorney Gascon earlier in this program about that particular officer involved shooting, and he had some strong opinion about it, and is still looking for. I guess they're in that review and investigation.
Well, I mean, there's a real challenge. They have dozens and dozens of cases to review, and that process could take a couple of years. So I think
it could.
Challenge.
Question: what does accountability ultimately look like to the community? Like how will community know that officers are being held accountable when they're found to be in violation of policy? How is that communicated? Because with Esparza and Lujan, we don't know. Dominion is still under investigation, obviously, but what does that look like to the community?
Well, some of it falls under the new law 1421 that gets released on some of that information. Short of that, it doesn't get released, and so that's one of the frustrating parts. As an organization, we look at the thresholds of criminal activity, policy violations that require termination, policy violations that require suspension, policy violations that require retraining and put back into place if we feel that they've learned the objectives of that incident. And at the end of the day, when we look at all that, there's a lot of legal issues that make it more complicated. If you look at the arbitrators, over 60% or 70% of cases are overturned by arbitrators. So as a police chief, it's very easy for me to just fire everybody one by one and do what Atlanta did on the back end and pay each one their millions of dollars across the country with what's happening. And I think a lot of people care about that, and a lot of people don't care about that part of it. And so as a chief of police, part of my employment here is to make sure I understand both the legal ramifications, holding people accountable, at the same time, the money we pay out in settlements and those that we pay out for making mistakes. A lot of settlements are not mistakes. A lot of are decisions by councils that don't want the public opinion to get out there that maybe the case got beat. And so a lot of councils decide to settle early and make sure it gets rid of off their table quicker. But at the other side of it is that we have to understand that if arbitrators are overturning these cases, as a chief of police, I got to understand that as well. And some would say that's not your issue. Don't worry about it.
I mean, because that's one way of looking at it. As a resident, it's our money either way. We're paying families, or claiming
paying both.
Yeah, we're paying both. We're paying both, and so we're paying that bill, and that's why it's really hard for some to not understand the decision, at least in the Blue case with Officer Esparza.
But bottom line, all this stuff is much, much deeper than anybody could realize. They just put a perceptual view subjectively out there on where we should be, and I get that as well emotionally. But there's so much more than that from a criminal, civil, legal process, policies, officer rights. Even though we look at other people's rights, like Mr. Blue or Mr. McLean's, we get that. But there's also police officer rights added to that. So it's a big confusion equation that we're going to have to figure out over the next half a decade to a decade.
Okay. Gang unit, no more. Is that the wrong message to those who are active in criminal activity?
For our gang units, I think it's a different. It's a myopic look to think that's what we did was go soft on crime. I mean, what we need to do, James, is smash all the old policing models and rebuild them. It's our generation's mission right now to do that. Our model is about intelligence-led policing, using data, knowing known gang members, active criminals. We may not like the need to police this way, but with over 400 guns we've taken off the street, how many more are out there? We've eliminated a 35-year gang model that we had in Pasadena when we used to have 30 people killed, black and brown, every single year in our community. And so we stopped that. We've stopped the violent killing rate. We still have the policing incidents that were dealt with, but it has become something that we have to focus on how we do it. We got to do it better. Every aspect of policing right now has got to be smashed, and we have to design new strategies with the community to rebuild this. And this is what we've done in Pasadena. We've dropped the violent crime rate by 70% in this town over 30 years. Problem with that is we've also increased not just the incarceration rate. What I don't hear enough people talking about, not even DA Gascon, is I don't hear talking about the incapacitation rate. That incapacitation rate has put people in jail for longer periods of time. We have to have a better balance that you don't go to jail for 5 years for raw cocaine. But if you take somebody's life, it's got to be treated more seriously. So we're in a place, and I made that commitment to make sure that our reorganization focused on that. Again, 20%, 26% drop in violent crime this year shows that this reorganization and remodeling our view of gang activity has made a difference. We just had the highest increase in gang violence and gun violence probably in our passing the history last year with COVID. We had an 85% increase in gun violence and a 59% increase in people shot.
And that's across the region, though. That's not.
Ours is higher than anybody else in the region. Outside of LA, you take us right here in this region, ours is higher than anybody's in this region.
And why do you think that is?
I don't know. How much of that was cabin fever with COVID, that people thought they needed a gun to protect themselves, or psychologically they're making different decisions to hold guns? I don't know. People were having a lot of incidents of people outside of certain areas in the city. We'd get calls of 10, 15 shots fired, and we'd get there pretty quick to have everybody gone, but casings on the ground. It was just horrific to see that. And so the officers are making these traffic stops that people don't like, and we're having this cooperation where people are saying, got a gun on my waistband 400 times, that, take the gun from my waist or take it from the car. But yet we've had some disasters out of that for the community, tragedies in which there's been loss of life. So it's a human error. I know the human science behind it, and how we make decisions and reaction time and all that stuff. But perception has really taken over that science. And right now, until we find a balance between the two, we're still going to want to demand from a community standpoint that we defund the police, that we do all these things. But there's examples out there to watch. What's happening in Minneapolis and Portland and Seattle and San Francisco, we see the crime rate dramatically going up, in Chicago as well. And now they're giving funding for more police officers, if you saw that. From Sacramento to Minneapolis, they want more police. So where's our balance with these incidents? And I think we have to keep working towards this. This is the interesting part, that sometimes I say, hey, take that back. I'm going to be here for 2-3 more years. We got work to do. But I think it's more important for me to set up the organization for 2022 and start taking it into that new direction and taking what we've had, because the chief is going to have to hold this line on the things that we've implemented and then look at other new strategies in the science and develop those and get those working forward.
All right. Well, we just about to get out of here. A couple more minutes. Your relationship and with the community is waning right now, and there was a lot of investment that I believe you were making, from the time that you became the interim on to being sworn in. I was a part of some of those conversations and facilitation and meetings. Can you recover, or is the oversight? Is the police oversight commission, activists calling for you to? Can you get it back if you ever had it? You know what I mean?
If you walk through certain communities with me, I could take you right now to 3 or 4 communities that have lost life, and from Park Street to other places. We could walk there, you and myself, and I'll let you measure what they will say about me in those communities, and it will be positive in how we're doing police work. I could take you around the rest of the community, different neighborhoods, and you'd hear the same thing. I could also take you into some churches. Very critical has been Pastor Manning, right? I think he's one of the ones I'd like to see me go. So we could talk to people like him and give you an opposite view. They recently wrote a letter about me with 50 pastors who called me, who signed that letter. I got calls from many of those pastors saying, one, either they didn't want to be on that letter, they were afraid to say something, or they weren't really happy with the direction this was going. So it really is, a love and hate relationship. But I can tell you, I hear from so many people around this community, from emails to people walking up to me, and nothing but positive points about what we're trying to change, and the realization of how terrible the emotions and the trauma from every police incident is. But we're doing our best here with the issues of poverty, the issues of school, the issues of health, the issues of family. These are decades old problems. And you don't see elected officials locally stand up and say, this is why this is occurring. We usually have to point to somebody. And if they don't point at me as a police chief, they usually point at Steve Mermel as the city manager, right? So you got to have somebody to push on. And I think, elected officials don't want that finger to be pointed at them. So when we take this job, we understand that's the dynamics of trying to get in there. It's a very difficult place to be, and we try to protect our council by not having you or anybody else point the finger at them, by us standing up and saying, I'm responsible for that incident. So I believe that the amount of emails and people who call me and contact me, it is so 10 to 1, but the one matters to me. The one matters even more to understand why they don't want me here or want me gone. It really does make a difference. Or the pastors assign a letter. They just want the change. And that changeover is very basic. We have an officer involved shooting, fire the officer. And this is a city, you got to remember, I could end on this point, James, very important. Every 5 to 10 years in my career, we've lost about 10 to 15% of our workforce. And in 2016, we lost 25%. Right now, we are hiring from the community. We have our lowest vacancy rate in decades. People want to come here. At what point do we lose that many officers again, and the millions and millions of dollars it takes to replace all of them? Like you said, what does it matter? The community is going to pay out anyway. So if we lose 20, 25 officers, we just spend the millions of dollars to rehire again. At some point, we got to care about the money. I don't know what, we're going to see what the city's status on their budget's going to be over the next 3 years. And it's going to be alarming for us to see that. And so, what kind of city do we want to be? Glendale financially? Do we want to be Pasadena financially in a good place? We got to pick and choose who the best practice city is, or make that for ourselves that we're the best practice.
Are you concerned, and we'll get out of here, are you concerned that Ben Crump is now working on the McLean case and how that may impact the department? I mean, a national spotlight is going to be on the department, and officers' actions are going to be scrutinized even more so. So I don't know if the department can afford any more, missteps in terms of public opinion.
Well, I mean, the missteps really go to critical incidents. For 120,000 incidents that we do a fantastic job. Our officers are amazing at all the work they do by the 400 guns that we've seized, or the outreach. Our community policing plan is working fantastic right now, no matter what anybody says. I know that by the feedback that's coming in. So the fact they've hired Mr. Crump, he's an attorney. This is what he does for a living. And I've seen it before in our town and other towns before as well. And so, criticizing our incidents is what has to be done. We're only as good as those criticisms at times. And so I understand he's going to be here. I understand he'll be part of the legal team, and we could put forth all the great things we've done in the last 3 years and beyond that when it comes to implicit bias and the training that we're doing. But as for the attorneys they hire, there's not much I could do with that. Equally, we hire fantastic attorneys in our professions that have great status and beaten cases and going to court. And the sad part, James, is at that point, that's where it becomes unemotional for people, because then it's about beating the case, winning the case on one side. The tragedy of Mr. McLean, the tragedy of loss of life, the fact that there's, a way to try to show other young kids you don't have to be in the situation, whatever that might have been or not. There's a way for us to really refocus and get people out of not carrying guns. I don't see a gun intervention task force in the city. I don't hear a lot of people telling me that I talked to 4 kids last week. And I told them stop carrying guns. It's all dumped on us. And when it fails, it is our fault. The finger gets pointed. I understand that theory, but it's very easy to wait for the outcome of something and then blame somebody for it. It's very difficult to get inside of that and be part of the solution and it fail. Nobody wants to be part of that, but usually it is the police department. That's where it's difficult.
All right. We'll park it right there, Chief. We got to get out of here. I appreciate your time. Stand by.
Yeah, I got the rest of the year here, man. And so into the beginning of next year, I'm not going anywhere to have these type of discussions. So it's important.
All right. Stand by, Chief. You're watching The Conversation Live. The Conversation Live focuses on social justice, restorative justice. Until we have another opportunity to speak again, as always, agape.